So my view of the inner critic is that it's a well-meaning friend that's just got it a bit wrong. It's trying to keep you safe. Now, the reason for this is, if we go way back to when we had to live in community together, is the fear of rejection. So there's this study that's been done, it's very, very famous, which is the fears of humans, sort of rated 1 to 10. And I think the fear of death, as in your own death, not of people you love, that comes in at about number 7. Whereas the number 1 fear of humans is rejection. So we're acting constantly and consistently, especially when we're a bit younger, perhaps, from this place of not being rejected.
This week, I speak with elite performance coach, trauma specialist, and highly sought after speaker, Annalie Howling, on all things inner critic, fear of rejection, what's stopping us from leveling up, polyvagal theory, and self-care. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Genoa Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's wellbeing and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week, we deep dive with your favorite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Up the top, you'll see a section for programs. Click on the programs, you'll see our mastermind, and you can sign up there now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000. We look forward to seeing you part of the mastermind. Annalie Howling, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
When I was looking at your Instagram and when I was looking at your messaging, there's a lot that I love about the work that you do. So I'm looking forward to pulling on all the threads of trauma, even boundaries and mindset today. But before we get started, can you give the guys a 60 to 90 second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a high performance coach, would be the sort of bracket I would fall under, but I do a lot of work in trauma. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person that pulls all of these things together into one. And I find myself working on golf courses. So I work with the European Tour, PGA players, right through to veterans of the UK Special Forces, the Armed Forces, and then people that the corporate athletes, the very top usually of sort of financial institutions and technology businesses. All over the world, actually. So that's kind of my mix of my day job. And then in between, I see people individually for sessions as well, where they maybe feel a bit stuck in their lives.
Based on your experience, what is the number one thing keeping people stuck in their lives, do you think?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's kind of 2 things. Can I have 2?
You can have 2. You can take 2. You can take 2.
Maybe a bit about age is the reason it's 2. So I think when you're a bit younger, you know what it is that you're meant for. I really believe that. And I think that it's not that you're afraid of what you can't do. I think we're all really aware of our weaknesses and stuff that we're not good at. And, but I think there's something inside us, like call it the call or whatever you want. But that's going to come with a load of change. And that might be change to your relationships and people around you. And people might be like, oh, but you've never wanted to do that before. That kind of things. That's inner critic territory. I think that's maybe more when you're younger, is there's a calling that you haven't answered yet, and maybe you don't know how. Then I think the other side of it, when you get a bit older, and I see this all the time, and this is kind of a hypothesis that I'm working on in whatever field I'm in, sports, corporate, wherever. When you become successful, it can make you more conservative. So when you're younger, you can be chasing, hunting, taking chunks out of the competition. You've got people that you're sort of like, I want to be like them. you're more risky, right? And also just practically, you haven't got as much stuff or responsibilities. So for me now, I'm nearly 42. I've got my daughter. I live in this nice big house. I've got to keep going. Classic fuel poverty in the UK. If I make mistakes, I lose a lot. So success, I believe, can make you more conservative. So that's my sort of hypothesis, is that I think when you're younger, there's a call that you maybe want to answer and you're scared about the impact that might have on people around you in your community, and you're not sure who you're going to find support you. As you get a bit older, as you get a bit more successful, I really think there's this huge thing that comes in that makes us go, oh, well, I can't afford to lose my status, my job, my anything. And it's probably kind of true. So what we do is, instead of that like risky, you know, more hunter behavior, we start becoming very conservative and acting from a place of, I can't let any of this go, is a very different lens to the one of like growth and discovery. So that's what I think.
I like it a lot. When you think about the inner critic, and in particular from what you said off air to just there as well, in terms of it being kind of the 20s and you having a lot of clientele in that age bracket, what's showing up from an inner critic point of view? Is it stepping into the unknown? Is it fear of judgment and being kind of outed by your group? Is it a combination of those? What have you noticed as some of the more common patterns in the 20s?
So the inner critic is linked to your physiology. This is old software, if you like, that hasn't been upgraded or updated for modern living. This is my view. So there's all these books out there about, you know, crushing your critic and stamping on negative self-talk. And I agree, we shouldn't listen to negative self-talk. But I think as a collective, in that age group in particular, where, you know, find your purpose, don't listen to negative self-talk, manifest your future, you know, whatever it might be. And you're like, well, but I'm not feeling good and it's not working. So my view of the inner critic is that it's a well-meaning friend that's just got it a bit wrong. It's trying to keep you safe. Now, the reason for this is, if we go way back to when we had to live in community together, is the fear of rejection. So there's this study that's been done, it's very, very famous, which is the fears of humans, sort of rated 1 to 10. And I think the fear of death, as in your own death, not of people you love, that comes in at about number 7. Whereas the number 1 fear of humans is rejection. So we're acting constantly and consistently, especially when we're a bit younger, perhaps, from this place of not being rejected. If we go back to this community time, you know, if we were all living together and we had literally for survival our basic needs, you know, heat, shelter, food, water, then if I was rejected from that setup, I would die. And it would be a really horrible death as well, being outside of that group with none of my basic needs being met. So it's really essential. And it's this old software that kicks in that says, oh, no, I need to be kept in the group. I need to be accepted by community. So what does that lead to? People-pleasing behaviors, which comes from this inner critic, which is should. So in my view, anything that has a should in it is a swear word, because we all have a great big pile of shoulds. I should have gone out for a 10K this morning. I should have trained earlier. I should have done this. I should have checked in with so-and-so. I should have whatever. You know, we've all got this great big pile of shoulds. And actually, is any of that what I want? Maybe, maybe not. But most of it, the majority of that should in some way is to meet either society expectations, external validation, people that I do know, in order to ensure that I don't get rejected. But it's not making you check in on what it is that you truly want. So this, like I say, it's this old software it's just within our physiology that kicks in to keep us connected. That's where this underlying people-pleasing behavior comes in, from the shoulding. It's all, when you understand it, you're like, oh, right, I see, okay. And then it's just a case of doing whatever exercises, whatever work it might be, boundaries, things like that, to protect yourself, to say, well, actually, I am okay to live on my own in a house as a woman with my kid, and, you know, like, it's all right. And then go back into those sort of, like I say, exercises and behaviors to choose what it is that I want. And it's very, very different language and energy.
One thing that you spoke of there that Gabor Mate actually spoke of really nicely in his new book is this inner conflict of attachment and authenticity. And at some stage, the change from the attachment, and as exactly as you said, in your 20s, and at some stage, you really step into that authentic, I guess, version of yourself and kind of potentially break away from the quote unquote tribe. What have you seen is required for people to break away from the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the attachment piece, in order to step into their true power and their most authentic self?
I think, like anything, this can be built or it can atrophy. So atrophy is like wastage, you know, particularly muscle, that we use that term. So I think, like anything, you can just start small. You know, what is it that perhaps a hobby you might like to try? What's a passion you had in your childhood that you haven't reignited since then, because it doesn't fit with your shoulds of your, what you should be enjoying or you should be doing, or what you think your group, your friendship group, or your social circle, or even your family are involved in. So what's something that you really do or did enjoy, or you feel an intuitive call towards, and just start there. Just start seeing what might be nice. I think this again is where this kind of huge, but then I don't know what it is that I want to do. Right, okay, it's interesting. But so there's no point me changing anything until I find the answer, until I know exactly what it is I want to do. And then I'm going to do that perfectly. And then this will be great. And it's like, well, you might be waiting forever. Like, I truly get messages from people in their, 50s and 60s saying it's too late for me. And it isn't. But I didn't want to be in that position for myself. And anyone listening, I really hope you don't find yourself sort of feeling like your body couldn't do the changes that maybe it is that you want. There's this fun question that we sometimes open up group coaching workshops with, which is, what's the most exciting thing you'll be doing when you're 70? And I love that question, because for me, I've obviously done this a few times. I've got a couple of stored up answers, and I live in the UK. So I always say, I'll be going up to the top deck of the bus, a double decker bus, because I want to be. And then if anyone's ever been to London on a bus, there's like 0.000 second when you get on before the bus starts moving. So actually to get up the stairs, to get to the top, it's like parkour, So I want to make sure that I'm able-bodied enough. That's the point of my answer. I want to make sure that I'm able-bodied enough, joyful enough, spontaneous enough to be able to do that, because what that means is the quality of my life when I'm 70 will be representative of being able to do that. So if I'm allowed, I'd love to ask you that question back.
Remind me of the question, something about when I'm 70.
What is the most exciting thing that you will be doing when you are 70?
Well, as someone who loves to adventure and explore, my answer is try new stuff. And I don't know exactly what it looks like, and I'm really interested in your thoughts, again, for something that you said off air before we started. I don't feel comfortable in the whole delaying my life, delaying my happiness, delaying everything until I retire, the standard kind of protocol. So I don't know what will be left to explore when I am 70, other than I want to try everything as it kind of comes through. And those that know me know that I'm quite happy to try anything and everything. But it doesn't sit well with me. Let's save our whole life till we retire. So you asking me that question actually evokes a fair bit of fire in me, because I think of everyone I'll start life when I retire, and they're in a job that they don't like, following a system that they don't necessarily believe in, and conditioned to a level of all my life kind of comes together when I'm 70. So the question that you asked me actually evokes quite the emotion in me, because that conditioning and programming unsettles me. So that's my very roundabout way of answering your question.
I love that. It's the antithesis of I'll be happy when.
Yes.
So I'll be happy when, I'll do this when I retire. It's like the opening sequence of the film Up, which I can't even watch. It's so painful to me, because it's this lovely, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's this beautiful couple, and they age, and they've got this, exactly to your point, it's like my biggest fear. It's like this beautiful jar of money, and they've got all these adventures they're going to do, and very tragically it's the wife passes away, and they never get to experience any of the wonders they thought they would, and just sort of had a loving life, but one where they didn't get to experience what they did. So yeah, one of my very best friends, she always says "por qué no," which is why not. So anything that comes up, por qué no? Let's just try it, let's just see, and be more in the moment and be more present. So I love your answer.
What's behind your energy and passion?
So I think it's similar to yours, whereby I am very much an experiential person, and I'm energized by learning, creating, doing. I'm someone that's, if I stop, it's not good for me. I sort of get de-energized, obviously. And I know, however, because I've been a person doing, grinding, grafting in exactly the machine that you talked about, something that was so anti who I was, and that destroyed me. I had a big burnout just before I was 30. And this is what put me onto this path here. So I know the difference between pouring my energy and my soul, if you will, not to be too woo, but into the right things, and I can go forever. But put me into a situation where I'm doing something I don't believe in, that doesn't really fulfill me, just for, whatever certain reward might be. I was very, in inverted commas, successful in my old career, and I was deeply unhappy and frankly ill, and I didn't know why. And it was because I was trying to make myself something that I simply wasn't, talking about the authenticity versus the attachment. So it gives me energy to be doing things that I love, that I'm really, truly aligned with. I'm a bit like you, I'm very mischievous as well. It gives me energy to kind of be like, that is not the way to do things, and offer an alternative. And then I do feel that I'm on this earth to help other people. And I know that the work that I do, particularly in this sort of area of trauma, when I see some of the things that we, have to go through, which are incredibly difficult, and I have to walk that with the client, I think it just also allows you to really value where you are and what we have. So I think that's very humbling that I'm able to do that work with someone. It's important. There's no ego in that. That is me being with someone in the darkest moment. When you do EMDR, which is this trauma technique, eye movement desensitization reprogramming, there is a moment we have to go into the worst moment of whatever the individual's traumatic experience is. Now, I'm going to let you and the listeners fill in the gaps about what that could be, because it's truly horrendous for most people, and I'm there witnessing them in that space and taking them through it, which is an honor, frankly. So when I come through that, I think it's very humbling that, it makes you very grateful. It makes gratitude easier for me, I think, for one, that I'm able to do this and I'm able to help. And I really believe that if anyone is able to help someone else in whatever capacity, that is something that's very fulfilling. There is such a thing as the helper's high, obviously being careful of our boundaries and not overgiving. So yeah, it's extremely humbling.
One of the things that I think is super important for a coach on any level is and it obviously speaks so nicely to the work that you do, is to be able to hold someone in those depths, the depths that you talk of. You have to have been there yourself. What work have you done in order to be able to hold someone in those depths and not get dysregulated or thrown out by their shadow or anything else?
Yes, because transference, which you'll know is a term that for anyone listening. So transference is when you over empathize or you've taken on too much of the person's situation. You shouldn't really work with someone from that place. So as an example, I won't work with minors. My daughter's 6.5. I just would find that too heartbreaking. I wouldn't be able to do a good job. There are some extraordinary coaches and therapists that do, and absolutely hats off to them. I know that's something that I would over empathize with, and I would be at risk. I still think I would do a good job, but I'd be at risk of finding that too difficult, either in the moment or certainly afterwards. I wouldn't be able to sort of shake that off and go about my daily life. So I think having some just knowing, again, that's authentic to me. I could say, yeah, absolutely, send them in. That would be inauthentic. What haven't I done? So, I've done everything. I mean, I had my burnouts to around 30, and so this is like 12 years ago. And a good friend of mine at the time had started doing coaching in the States. And at the time that was very woo and weird and, crikey, dream catchers and coaching. And it was all very strange and no one did it. And she did a session with me, a guided visualization, and it was so impactful. And I'm type A, I'm a high achiever. I was in a big job. I've got an MBA in economics, I am type A. And it was so transformative. And I remember it to this day. And to this day, pretty much everything came true from that visualization. So, and from that, I was then, completely into my normal way of like, I need to find everything out about this thing. I need to learn about it. So I went over to San Francisco myself and spent huge swathes of time there. North Bay, because it's the home of kind of coaching. I'm sure you know that, like all of the coaching schools and everything come out of SF, North Bay. And I wanted just to really indoctrinate myself in it, because being a type A, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the best. So I sent myself over there and then did all the certification. So, I mean, I do family systems, relationship systems, sort of traditional life coaching, leadership, psychometrics, you name it. And I've done this, like I said, the certification level in every single modality. I've studied the physiology. I work with someone that does functional med. So we go through all the Polyvagal Theory. And then honestly, there was a gap, and my marriage was starting to, really become very difficult for me to be in. There was no great, terrible thing. No one had, cheated with the neighbor or sold the family silver or nothing like that. But it was clearly not making anyone particularly happy anymore. My daughter was very young at the time. And I was like, right, well, I feel like I needed to find something for myself to help me with the answers, and to go there if I'm going to single parent on my own, if I'm going to do this for my daughter, I really want to make sure I've gone through sort of my closet, my skeletons, Pandora's box, to make sure that I've got the resiliency to do this and do it as well as I possibly can for her. I have this responsibility to her. And so that's when I discovered EMDR. It just kept coming up, and I'm someone that sort of follows signs and signals, and I found a practitioner that could do it, and it was truly excuse me, it was so transformative. It made such a huge impact so quickly. And then that was the piece for me, a missing piece in my work with some of my clients, was this, it just closed the loop. And ever since then, I've kind of developed and blended all of the modalities that I've learned, including my corporate life and burnout itself, and divorce. I did a 3-year divorce on 2 lockdowns. Like that was fairly high anxiety. I now understand truly what anxiety feels like. I didn't have it before, and I had it during one of those periods. So I think all of these things where we have to, as you say, go into our own shadow and face it ourselves, has enabled me to be a much better practitioner in the work that I do.
When it came to divorce and I guess turning that spotlight back on yourself, what was the biggest piece that came out of that that's actually obviously been healing for yourself, but also quite transformative in the work that you do?
So divorce, my ex and I actually have a very good relationship. So that, I say, was something that's quite that was quite transformative, is how do we parent whilst navigating the separation of our relationship and work through that dynamic. And it wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always pretty, but maintained respect. I think that's, so I'm sure there are times he'd say he didn't like what my team may have done and the other, but we managed to maintain that our daughter was always the most important person in that. I also I kind of discovered, if you will, about really good boundaries during that time, because as I say, it was lockdown, it's homeschool, you name it. And I'm getting letters from lawyers that are designed to trigger you. They're designed to trigger you. You get one at 5, you're going to have listeners nodding, going, a Friday, 5 p.m. and they're going to know exactly what I mean. You get a letter at 5 p.m. on a Friday. It's designed to terrify you and for you to have it all weekend to ruminate on this and be terrified. I would get them sent to me when I was on a solo holiday with my daughter. And so every day I'm having to ring my lawyers on a trip with her when I'm meant to be looking after her and being present. And it's horrific. And it's like someone constantly poking you. And so I remember thinking, okay, which I do in these dark moments and with clients, like, what can I do? What do I have in my armory? Like, what can I either say no to? What can I put in place? And I spoke to my team, and I just said, and they're wonderful. I absolutely love my team. And I spoke to them and I said, I'm never going to look at an email or a letter sent by the other side ever again. Just so you know, if it's serious, if it's something that I need to know, call me or message me. And can we design that in? And they were like, well, yeah, of course, no problem. We want to send it to you. And I was like, no, it's designed to be scary. I don't speak lawyer speak. You do. If it's smoke and mirrors, or if it's something we actually need to take an action about. And they were like, absolutely fine. So that's what we did. So for the last 18 months, I've never read, or it's all done now. It's done like 6 months ago, but I never read another email or a letter ever again. They didn't know that. They carried on sending, scary things. I never looked at one. My team would call me. And that's honestly something quite practical, because I work with guys in particular going through this, not as a sole focus, but you've got a big job like I have, and you're doing that on the side, like your side hustle is doing a divorce as well as everything else. And that was one of the best things that I learned, was this is a war of attrition. It's designed to make you break. So you go, oh, screw it, just have whatever. It's designed in that way. So what is something I could do to stop that happening to me? A boundary. What boundary have I got? I used my team, and they were great. And as I don't know if it's ironic or not, I think it's quite serendipitous, but I'm giving a keynote speech this year in October at the Family Law Conference. So all of the lawyers will be there hearing my experience. And I spoke very openly as well about needing to have EMDR after a private court hearing, because it was so aggressive, the barrister from the other side, that I knew that I'd taken on trauma from that in that moment. And I thankfully have the tools and the skills and the resources and the people to go and see to get it sorted out very quickly. So it didn't manifest and take roots and start becoming something else. But yeah, I'm going to go and share that experience, because it's designed to break you. And so there's many other things in life, not just divorce, that I think are almost designed to break you. So you just go, oh, fine, have it. Oh, fine, I'll work that extra day. Oh, fine, I'll give up my family holiday. Oh, fine, I will take the laptop and answer those emails. Oh, fine, I'll do that for my family member or whatever it might be. Not fine, because my daughter was getting an anxious, strung out, emotional, not in a positive way version of myself. Not fine. So I put some boundaries in there.
The nature of your work, and I know you speak a lot about boundaries, have you found it challenging at times to kind of stay like open-hearted and in the feminine with the boundaries energy? I know a lot of kind of females, when they think boundaries, they think like cold, hard, closed down. Is that something that you've struggled with, or that you see other clients struggle with?
Yeah, I think that's a common, exactly to your point. I think you think, oh, well, I've got to maybe become harder and more closed off. I think there's some things that you tolerate less, which is, I think that's maybe also about getting older a little bit. So I read this beautiful quote, which is about, you can keep your heart soft if you keep your boundaries strong. And I like that. So I think that keeping your heart really soft, you don't need a thick skin. You just need a good boundary. And a boundary can still be spending time with people. It's just choosing how you do it. There are some people that I like very much, but potentially I may be triggered by something, or I'm just tired. I'm getting a lot better at saying, look, I've pulled, late nights. I've been relaunching this program, which I have been. I know I'm not my best self right now. And I say it rather than try and hide it in a critic, should try and get through it and then, deplete myself further on. So I think probably with me, my boundaries have been maybe conversely asking for more help and being more open about how I actually feel. And then, if somebody is able to or unable to meet you there, then that's just good information, and absolutely keeping your heart soft. This world is full of so many things, but I think perhaps because of the stuff that I do and the things that I see the darkest of the dark, and I see the most beautiful people as well that are trying to manage these things. And I think maybe that gives me even more hope, but being aware of, not everyone is good in this world.
Completely agree. You've said a couple of times the darkest of the dark. What does that look like, and what environments are you in where that tends to show up the most?
So I would say probably for me, and maybe this is a transference thing, so probably sexual assault. So probably female sexual assaults. And remember, I have to do the worst moment. And then what happens is with any kind of trauma is you as the person that this has happened to, you take on shame. So there's a trauma response, which is fawn, and not many people know that much about. It says fight, flight, freeze. People know about. Flop, fairly obvious, pass out, just completely pass out. And fawn is the fifth and sort of lesser known and lesser discussed. And I have never had someone in, and we're talking like premeditated, like there's, gone to high court, like there's no question that this was someone had horribly decided to go and commit this crime. And I've had the victims in, if you will, and they have all taken away an element of shame that in some way, shape or form, they have some responsibility for this, or they could have done something differently. And that, I think, is, if there's one thing that I can bring into this world and sort of normalize that fawn is a trauma response. And what that means is that kicks in before any rational thought. I mean, your amygdala, your limbic system, the animal part of your brain goes, it fires so much faster than your prefrontal cortex, which is your thoughts, dates, times. If you like your rational brain, your cognitive area, your Broca's area, your language is gone as well. So all of this function is offline because you're in danger. But there's not enough knowledge, I think, that fawn is the same as fight or flight. It's all the others, they're exactly the same. So it's gone way before. Now, fawn shows up in family relationships, obviously. If you're a child or and you're in an unsafe environment at home. My father was very violent towards me growing up. I can't leave. Where am I going to get my basic needs met? So I would maybe find myself being nice towards him or trying to win his favor, or certainly trying not to get, beaten one day, try and appeal to him in some way and be a good girl or whatever that looks like in that system. That's fawning, but it's to keep me safe. The same happens a lot in the workplace. You might have a narcissistic boss. I suggest that sometime we've all had a narcissistic boss, but I need to pay my mortgage and, look after my family. So it might kill me inside, but I've got to try and fawn to appease this person in some way. And then in romantic relationship, this can show up as well, where there's, it can be unsafe, victims of domestic violence, all of these things. And then sexual assault, at some point, there may have been an element of fawn. And every time I have someone in, I say, listen, I would have done exactly the same thing. And I can tell you, everybody, if they heard this story, would have done the same thing as well. And it's because it's a trauma response. And actually it's your system taking over, saying this is a way that we can stay alive. And I think when people realize that, you see the shame coming off, that it couldn't have been different.
What do you think at the core of everything that you do with your skill set is the reason people come to you?
I think I make an impact quickly. I think that when and I've done this, you can go through talk therapy and it's great. There's and coaching is fantastic. And there's a really good time to do both of those things. But there's also a time when you are just so exhausted, when you've tried to figure it all out, when you've read the books, done the, the podcast, the talks, the talk therapy, maybe some coaching, and you're just so tired, and there's something that just keeps coming up. I say it's like an event that is probably from your past, but you see it always blocking the road in your future. That's what I do. That's what I get rid of. That's what I can move out of the way, so that you can have, everything that you've done in the future. And, from personal experience, when I first found it, I was so tired. And I really had done all the stuff. I'm a coach, I'm a therapist, I've got that network. I'm blessed that I can be super vulnerable with, my community. I can say all the things and I'll be seen and held and honored and, all the stuff. And I was done. I was so exhausted. I needed somebody to kind of, like a massage, take this out of my head and just do it for me. And that's what this work does. And I think that's it is for PTSD in particular. And there's not one person I've ever met, including people that go, oh, I haven't got any trauma. Yes, you have, and we'll find it. So it's not as we think it may look. I think a lot of people think they don't. Well, I wasn't a veteran. I don't deserve to have trauma. My trauma's not big enough. Is it affecting how you live your life? Yeah, then it's big enough. Big enough that if we can move it out of the way, you're going to have so much more capacity to be there for people that you love. That's why I'm doing what I do. Do
you think there's a lot of noise over the last couple of years about being trauma informed? Do you think that we may swing too far the other way and over capitalize on trauma informed and kind of lose resilience or things that may have a swing the other way? Or do you see it all as good news in terms of where we're heading with it?
I think it's beneficial if people inform themselves. It's like, I think it would be good for people to read things like Gabor Mate's Myth of Normal, Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk. I think Nicola Perra, the holistic psychologist, her book is great. It's really, really good for anyone that wants to start somewhere. Can't think what it's called now, but it's Nicola Perra, the sort of the orange cover. It's fantastic. And it's a really good explanation and walkthrough as to your physiology. So for me, I think for people that are struggling, you think there's something wrong with you and you don't think it will ever change. And I think the beauty of trauma work, which is polyvagal theory, that's what I'd encourage people to look into. When you understand that, you understand where it's your body taking over and why it's doing what it's doing. Like me talking about that fawn response, as soon as you're educated, if you like, and you become aware, you're like, oh, right. But do I think there's a danger? Yes. I think there is some very low barrier to entry. You do coaching, like someone can do a weekend coaching course online and then go out seeing people. And I think that, and it's not always regulated and people don't know what to ask for. Like, what qualifications do you have? There's not necessarily a rigid set of standards that people know what to ask for and what to check and what to do. So I'd always encourage people, if they're going to go and look for someone to do some work, is to get a lot of recommendations. Most people will also give you like a chemistry session or something like that, just to check that you're happy, with sort of how they're working. But I mean, as you know, with every single sort of, should we say, good movement, there's always someone there with waiting to commercialize on it. I would say maybe do some, like I said, there's some really good books that are great and will give you a walk through. And if someone's looking into doing this work, which I would encourage, is just to ask a few questions, find some of that community, ask for recommendations, and then go about it from there. But yes, there are, as with all things, there's always someone waiting to commercialize an opportunity. And that's actually why I started my Instagram. I started it during I think it was lockdown 1. We had 2 in the UK. I know you had a very long one, so I'm not saying mine was well.
Yeah.
but I think I'm pretty sure it was lockdown 1, because I was so, I feel like from your early answer as well, you're going to really get this. I was so disgusted and horrified that there were people out there looking to commercialize other people's pain. Oh, pay me $99 and I'll cure your anxiety. I was like, how irresponsible, and just no. So I started my Instagram to put out completely free, absolutely free, and it, is, and just quality advice, a podcast recommendation, a book for, get it on Kindle for nothing, whatever, just anything that might help people, and be, things that I tell my clients that they pay me a huge amount of money for, my private clients, but I'm going to give that away because people need it. And I do not agree that other people should be commercializing. I've got a fake account right now going, I keep getting messages about it, and they're asking for donations. They're pretending to be me asking people for donations. And I can guarantee that's a donation to themselves. So, and I get this all the time. So yeah, unfortunately, there will always be people out there trying to commercialize. And just to anyone listening, please just follow your intuition and your instinct. If it feels off, it probably is. And as I say, there are some really great resources. Maybe you can tag some of those, or I'll share them after, just to start there. And I think there's a huge amount you can actually start with yourself. And if it feels like a fit, follow that.
When it comes to commercializing things and potentially a society that has normalized things that potentially might not have been normalized, what do you see as some of the bigger problems under the bracket of trauma that we've potentially commercialized and normalized that you look at and go questionable at best?
I mean, I would say probably the training. And like I say, because there's not this broadly known body. If I was working in financial services in the UK, I'd be the FSA, Financial Services Authority, and everyone would know that's the one body, and I'm regulated. And there's the ICF, the International Coaching Federation for Coaching. But there's a lot of different sort of modalities, training areas, bodies within this field of work, and then internationally it changes as well. So I think it's quite tough to keep keep up to date with and keep an eye on all of these things. So I'd say that's something to kind of watch for. I think that's as I say, that's one way you just go for personal recommendations to try and find it out. Yeah, and I think it just comes back to if there's someone that seems to be making money, or it's some kind of hard sell or something like that, it probably is. So to steer away from that. I see with anything, wherever there's a trend, people will go after it, and not everyone is doing it with the right intentions. Whereas I truly believe, a bit like Simon Sinek, the infinite game versus the finite game. I think, and this is maybe also linked to boundaries and also linked to being older, I think I'm getting a lot better at seeing it, and I can watch something and be like, okay, I don't think that this is going to go the distance. Whereas, because I don't think it's got congruence or integrity. I think this is going to stop short because it is just here for the money, and more often than not it is. And I think we can see that in individuals as well. I think we've all seen those people that, some people just do it because they're lovely and they've always got a brand new idea, but they never follow it through. And you're like, oh, here we go, it's the latest, lovely idea they've come up with, that's great, and they'll never actually do anything about it. Or you've got people that will do it for a period of time until they truly just get what they want, and there's no consideration about legacy or real impact or where you might leave people. And so when I was on my training course for the EMDR, I had done it, as I say, I will always try before I buy with anything, because I think I would never have a client in that I don't believe in what I'm saying or what I'm doing. I don't understand that. I mean, it's just, why would I have someone here with me saying I know this works if I don't know it works? I just wouldn't do it. But I understand why. So when I was on this training course, there are a huge amount of people from the NHS, which is the UK's National Health Service. Okay. And I think on this particular course, there was probably like 30 people or something like that. And this, the normal setup, which you would have done loads of them. And they said, how many people have had EMDR? We're on a course to learn about doing it. I think it was 3 of us had ever tried it. And I understand why the other people hadn't. They aren't paid enough. The NHS weren't going to pay for them to have the experience for themselves. But yet, we talk about transference. One of the people there worked at the ports, I think in Dover, where they're literally receiving the refugees on the boats who have lost children. I mean, I can't imagine the depths of trauma. And this lovely lady who's doing that job, putting herself in there, would not ever have had the resources to be able to experience that training for herself. So sort of, how do you know what good looks like? And I mean, that's a sad example, I think, that she hadn't been able to have that experience for herself and therefore wouldn't know, and she's facing that kind of level of trauma day in and day out. And to me, that's wrong. There should be some way that that's balanced out. So yeah, I hope that this kind of thing would reach more people. But I do know that in the UK, the wait list for EMDR pre any of the lockdowns was 18 months. So I don't sense that has lifted.
That's a while. That's life for some people, which is really scary. When it comes to boundaries, you talk about that a lot. Why is that so important to you? And how has that shown up in friendships, relationships, and even kind of work environment?
I think, I'm trying to be a reformed people pleaser. So I definitely spent, as I say, I grew up in a violent household with a threat of violence. So I grew up around being hyper arousal, which is when you're waiting for the next time that you've messed up rather than waiting for, oh, everything's lovely all the time, And obviously I didn't realize all of the impacts of this, but then I went into a career in property and construction, which, this is way before Me Too. And I'm not throwing the whole industry under a bus here, but it was not a good fit for me because there was a huge amount of toxic masculinity in that industry. I think it's particularly hard for the guys. I think in the UK, construction is the biggest industry sector where men will take their own lives. And I'm not surprised by that because it's incredibly hard. It's a hard working environment. It's not particularly pleasant conditions. It's very difficult. And it's difficult to get people talking about how they're really feeling and what they're going through. And so I found myself in that industry, and what I would do was to cope, repress any element of femininity, vulnerability. I put myself in coats of armor. I would never show any emotion. I really would try and be kind of one of the lads, so to speak, in coping with that work. And it took me years and years to unpick that and be okay with my femininity actually being a real superpower. And working with men in particular is a superpower because I know what it's like to lock it away. And I think there's some things that we can talk about and share that might not do sometimes with a male coach or therapist, things like that. So I think that for me, unpicking the conditioning that I'm, hands up, a lot of that I put on myself as a way to cope. So I'm not blaming other people. That was just how I learned to get through. I learned with my father when he would hit me that the way to get him to stop was if I didn't react. If there wasn't either me crying or whatever, if the last time he ever did it, I think I was about 14, and I said, carry on. It's only going to hurt me for a minute. And he didn't do it again after that. So I sort of learned that early, that if I locked it off, if I shut down, if I had an armor around me, that, almost a bit like this trauma response, mine's more freeze. If I just cut off to everything, including my own feelings, then I could cope. So that's why boundaries have become really important to me. Boundaries for me have been more about softening and opening and trusting. And to do that, I have needed to have some good boundaries to give me the space to be able to sort of grow into that. And the friendships is really interesting. I get a lot of questions about that. That's one of the questions I get the most, is the devastation when you have been betrayed by a friend. And I think it is really devastating. In romantic relationship, at times you almost expect it, and you have your friends there, particularly maybe a really close friend, that your support network, they jump in and, do all the stuff, and they're there for you. And if you're betrayed by a friend, it's so devastating because typically you've shared so much with them. You have been really vulnerable, you have opened yourself up. And then when you feel betrayed by a friend or a friendship, it's a very, very hard place to come back from. So that's one where I think I like to go into things expecting the best of people. I think the boundaries element is the yin and yang that for me now, which is I know of myself that at the first sign that something maybe isn't aligned with my highest good, I will start placing some boundaries, and they don't have to be extreme, they don't have to be permanent, but I will start putting something in and be able to watch that system for a while, rather than say jumping in, people pleasing, fixing. One of my favorite things is fix everything and everyone else, and not look after your own needs. So I think that's where boundaries can be really brilliant. It doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't have to be extreme. It can be something really simple to start with, and it can just allow you for a pause to watch as a system may rebalance and settle itself. I'm using the word system, that's my training, so it's like relationships, romantic friendships, anything, because things go through a state of flux, especially very long-term systems like friendships and family. And sometimes you need to re-educate someone about something. And maybe you're changing how you eat or your exercise habits. Maybe you're going to do work in an entirely new way, follow this passion, and that means you're not around on a Saturday night anymore or something like that, so allow and understand that you may implement a boundary which is hard for you, especially when you've never done it before. It's really like, oh God, can I do this? Say no. That's what I'm going to say no to this thing or this person, and I never have before, and will they still like me if I say it? If they're the right person for you, absolutely. But I would also say to people listening, allow them to get it wrong a little bit, because you're re-educating them with something. So place a boundary in, but also do expect maybe a bit of pushback, and just also that people are busy with their own lives and their own stuff, and they may get it wrong a few times. We're doing a re-education process here. So sort of allow for people to kind of get used to it as well.
I assume even with you, as you've done more and more kind of work and healing of yourself, the way in which you've implemented boundaries may have changed as you become more intuitive and more attuned to that person. Because I feel like sometimes people implement boundaries because whether there's a lack of attunement or there's a lack of understanding, it's like, fuck, I'm just going to, put this boundary here. It might be a trauma response, as opposed to going like, no, this feels good or this feels wrong. Do you find that pattern playing time and time again?
Yeah, there's an amazing book, which I think everyone should read, and it's called The Big Leap by a guy called Gay Hendricks. And he talks about this thing called your upper limit. And so this is all in a critic territory. He talks a lot about golf. You've got some golfers on as well. It's a great, it's a really good book. It's a brilliant book. It's quite small as well. And he talks about how we start hitting our upper limit, which is the point that we're really kind of about to have it all. So let's just say you do find a really good relationship. You've got a nice job going on. You're happy, you're fit, whatever's, things are going well, right? All the lights are turning to green as you're driving. You're in flow. And then what happens is we start getting triggered by childhood messaging. So I grew up here. You might be familiar with some of these classics. That sounds too good to be true. You can't have it all. Work is hard. You need to work hard to get money. It's hard to have money. It's hard to keep money. Everything is so expensive. These are the sort of messages that kind of kick in from before. And so you think, you get to this upper limit. Subconsciously, you've got these messages. Let's go with, it's too good to be true. This can't be happening to me. It's too good to be true. There must be something wrong with it. And then we start self-sabotaging from the place of the inner critic. So let's just say it's a lovely new partner and everything seems to be so incredible. It genuinely might be. And he says that the thing that triggers us the most, that hits our upper limit the most, is another person. We get high from another person, like romantic or sexual relationships. So that is the thing that's likely to trigger you the most and hit your upper limit. And the only way to retain your autonomy is to remove yourself regularly from that situation. Now, that's not boundary, run, hide, but it is maybe, okay, I'm noticing that this person is, activating me. Don't know yet maybe what's good or bad, but I feel like I'm not being fully rational. I'm going to say, actually, do you know what? I can't see you again this week. Let's put something in for next week. And then you've got some time to reflect. Let's say romantic relationship, look at their communication style in between, regulate your system, and then go back and sort of see them again clearly. So this is a really interesting way of looking at it. I love this upper limit now, because you can see when it starts happening. Like, I work a lot with golfers, and I don't know if you're familiar with golf, but it's, tournament play is 4 days. So you see people all the time that say we're leading on the last day, and they will drop down. And equally, you see people going out that were not leading, that are chasing, hunting, taking chunks out. And it's a lot of the time to do with the fact that they were upper limiting. Oh God, but it's going to be hard to hold on to the lead, or I can't continue from here. It's too good to be true going out at 10 under, whatever it might be. It's like self-sabotage starts kicking in, and then you maybe see some changes coming around. So I would really recommend people looking at that and just understanding again, right, okay, this is going on with my system. And a boundary can simply be, I need to do a little bit of self-care, self-evaluation here. That can be the boundary. And what does that look like? It doesn't have to be something you're pushing onto another person necessarily. It's more about self-inquiry. And I would say that's the thing that's changed with me personally the most. It's not necessarily shoving a boundary in and going like, right, you've said something a bit off, here's a boundary, we're done. It's more, okay, I'm feeling activated. Let's check in, and let's look at, am I hormonal? Well, have I slept enough? What's going on? Am I being fair? Am I, is there really a reason that actually I didn't really like that? and let's just place something in maybe a period of time, or ask a question. What is it that you meant by that? You know, we never ask, we interpret and come up with our own solutions. So I would say the thing that's changed with me is placing almost a boundary in on myself and kind of checking in on myself. And, you know, is this me acting from the best version of myself? And am I feeling confident in my thought process right now? And if not, what are the things in my armory that I know I can do to get my mental state back to sort of clarity, where I feel good to make a decision from? And picking up on something you said earlier, I think boundaries has become very trendy. I think that's become a bit acceptable. I think it's become a bit inauthentic. I think it's like, oh, I'm putting a boundary in, I'm not doing it, it's a boundary. You know, I think it's that's something that we're on the risk of going the wrong way, where it allows people to be unskillful and actually not do the work by, oh, you've done this, so I'm placing a boundary in. Potentially, but a bit like I'm saying, well, what are you doing for yourself though? Because, you know, obviously there are some situations where you must instantly put a boundary in, and we do not tolerate certain behavior, but it's not a tool to prevent any self-inquiry. And that's what I think it can be at times.
You said it perfectly, to kind of speak to your point. And I think the more work you do, the more you probably reflect before you project. And that would be, I would say, a common theme of like not even taking the time to inquire and just sit with, because, you know, kind of coming, I guess, back almost to the mirror theory, like there's something in every situation for all of us in terms of learning, healing, growing, expanding. But to speak to that from your own personal experience, what have you noticed in terms of the way in which you view the world as a mirror over the kind of last 12 years? I think, if I've got my timeline right, from 30 and changing things up to the way in which you see the world now.
I think there's something that I see in sessions with people and that I think has become true to me. So non-attachment is the best thing that I could ever have learned for myself. And I actually learned, I mean, I'm very spiritual myself, but I learned that in systems coaching, because one of the things they teach you to do is they have these inquiries. So again, whatever the system may be, a romantic partnership, a family, a business, anything. I do a lot of post M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions work. And so all of this stuff. What is trying to happen? So you look at whatever the system and you're looking underneath it, like there's conflict. What is trying to happen here? Does it need to be repaired? Is it trying to break away? You know, and when you start seeing the world in that way, you realize just how everyone is doing the best with what they have, and sometimes that's not okay for me. So that's the sort of the lens that I would invite everyone that's going on. They're doing the best that they can with what they've got. And maybe that's also not okay for me. And both things can be true at once. When you look back on trauma, a lot of people come and they're let's just say it's something from childhood. People are often feel very difficult about being disloyal to their parents. I feel a bit awkward about saying it. I haven't had a relationship with my parents 20 odd years because they, you know, beat me up as a child. Like, it's not, you know, but I feel a bit awkward about saying that. And there's a lot of, you know, there has been stigma around it. So they were doing the best with what they had at the time, but that's also not okay for me. And it's not an environment I would choose to have my daughter anyway near, et cetera, et cetera. So, and these people come in and they're like, oh, but I know my parents were great. And then you hear that they were, you know, suffering with addiction and you know, violent or whatever else. And so there's this big sense of not wishing to be disloyal. So I often offer this as a way of not necessarily non-judgment, but a way of being able to go one step further and look underneath. They may well have been doing the best they could with what they had at the time, but that also wasn't enough for you. And as soon as you say that, you see people go, okay, because it allows them to take off any feeling of disloyalty. And I think that that's sort of what is often going on in these systems and things that we're looking at. And the biggest learning for me, I don't think there are that many people in the world that are truly evil. I think there are some, but I don't think there are loads of them. I think I've probably come across two in my life that I think genuinely, actually, you truly are just a bad person. I think most people are acting from a place of wounding experience, lack of experience, all the other stuff. Doesn't mean I have to tolerate it, but that allows that to be true. And also that here's the boundary. That's not good for me, so I'm not going to be a part of it.
Well said. I really like that way you've framed it. I've heard it framed different ways, but I like yours the best. Where can people find out more about you if they want to explore your work or your genius on social media?
Oh, thank you. So yeah, the easiest place is probably at Annalie Howling, like you're howling at the moon, as my daughter says, which is Instagram. I also am on TikTok as well. And then AnnalieHowling.com, which is my website. There's, for the first time ever, actually, I'm launching some group coaching programs. So, and I'm limiting it very strictly to 15 people each in a cohort. And I'm going to be on the WhatsApp personally, because again, I'm not commercializing people's pain. I believe that if we're going to make some changes, you'll know this, like you're not always, you might have the best friends and family in the world, but people are not changing at the same pace as you. Like you might be heartbroken right now and your friends are offering you advice, but they're also not there, or you're trying to follow this passion and find this new career, and people are encouraging, but they're also not in the experience that you are. And I think that by being in community and walking that path together is powerful. And then people can also book sessions when I travel. At the moment, I haven't got Oz in, I have got Dubai, I've got the States, and some sort of clinics when I'm doing the trauma work as well.
Do you do any sessions online, or are they mainly in person?
Yeah, I do.
Beautiful. Thanks again for all your insights and wisdom. It's been unreal to talk.
I've loved it. Thank you so much.